Hello, Twitter world. Hello, welcome to Goal Grab That Day. Today is another episode or segment of How Dare You Forget. As I said previously on the first episode, this is basically just a segment of kind of talking about fighters who MMA has kind of forgot. Unless you've been watching it and are an addict a bit like I am. Some people might forget how good these fighters were, or they can be overlooked because later in their careers, unfortunately, they just weren't as good. You've heard me previously give out about guys like Anderson Silva kind of went on too long, so this kind of covers guys like them and other guys that may have been overlooked. People didn't know how good they really were or what kind of records they may have had because it was in the early years, or sometimes they go on a bad run towards the end of their career, like I was saying. But anyway, previously we talked about Matt Serra. Today we're going to talk about, probably a little more obvious, but some people may not be, BJ Penn. So obviously BJ, the last few years, has kind of gone on a really bad run. He's had some bad shit happen. Not bad shit, but he's been in some fights outside of street fights, basically, things like that. But like BJ Penn in his day, if you don't know, was an absolute monster. An animal, would fight anybody, didn't care what size they were. He's another one of these guys who, in the early days, for an American especially, well, Hawaiian, but the same thing, was an excellent jiu-jitsu practitioner. He holds some record as well of, I think, being the first American to win a world gold medal at the World Jiu-Jitsu Championship. So that's kind of something people wouldn't know, but he fought in so many. He fought from featherweight all the way up to middleweight, and everywhere in between. He was ranked number one in both lightweight and welterweight at the same time, which I don't remember anyone else that has done that. The UFC don't usually allow that anymore because you're obviously holding up two divisions, but it doesn't happen as often anymore. And especially, in the early days when, there might have been a lot less, should I say, testing and things like that in the heavier weight divisions. And in my opinion, BJ Penn probably wasn't one of those guys. He just didn't have the body of someone that was messing around with those kind of things. And he was also, not that this obviously could be bullshit, but he was one of those guys who always spoke out against PEDs and stuff like that. But anyway, to get on to why I think he's one of these guys who people forget about, mostly because later in his career he's had some silly losses, but he's just another one of these guys who should have retired a few years ago. But in the early days, he was, which people definitely do forget, is the lighter divisions probably would not be around if it wasn't for BJ Penn. He brought excitement to those divisions. For a long time, Dana White and a lot of, it still happens even nowadays, the lighter divisions just don't get enough shine. And guys like, in particular, BJ Penn, maybe Frankie Edgar a little bit later, but BJ Penn was Dana White, I think, has come out and said that if it wasn't for BJ Penn, lightweight and below probably wouldn't exist, or wouldn't have existed for a long time, and you'd lose out on a lot of great fighters that fought in those divisions. But he went on to be, a lightweight champion, welterweight champion, such a well-rounded fighter at that time. He was, I remember watching kind of, as he was breaking in, or a few years later when you did get to see it. He's one of the first guys who had a bit of everything. He had really good boxing. He had, maybe not the greatest wrestling, but his jiu-jitsu was quality. And such an aggressive jiu-jitsu fighter as well, would go for chokes from all sorts of angles. His flexibility was unbelievable off his back. Go back and watch some of his fights. He's really good. Fought legends and beat legends. Beat Matt Serra, I believe. Beat Matt Hughes. Never beat George St. Pierre, but had some great fights with GSP as well. And some great rivalries there too. Went on to, like I said, beat some great fighters. Another interesting character. He was he was inducted into the modern era of the Hall of Fame as well, and rightly so. It actually irritates me how people forget how good he was in the early days. And I remember Dana White saying that he was quite difficult to deal with, in the sense that he was almost willing to fight anybody, whereas now you might have the opposite where Dana probably finds it hard to get guys to fight or take certain fights because of money. But BJ Penn at one point wanted to fight at heavyweight. Already having gone from, featherweight, lightweight, welterweight, middleweight, which is crazy. Then he wanted to step up to heavyweight or light heavyweight, which is insane, Not a big guy either, but tough dude. Just tough, no shit. Was known for having, not the smartest thing, but known for being super crazy, having super crazy sparring sessions and things like that. Just, I think at the time he broke the all-time title defense record in lightweight. I don't know how many it was. It wasn't a whole lot compared to nowadays, but still broke that record. Super entertaining fighter, Sorry, I'm just looking at my notes. Yeah, he was also a legit black belt within like 3 or 4 years from starting out. And I'd said on a previous episode, or the one I was talking about, Matt Serra, where on average it takes people 10 years. On average it takes 10 years to get your black belt. And this wasn't just a black belt that was given to him. He was a legit black belt. So absolutely, definitely worth talking about BJ Penn. Like I said, how dare you forget about BJ Penn? But just one of those, absolute legends. It's a shame to see kind of where his career went towards the end. But hopefully, he goes on to maybe coach or do some things like that, because he is, one of the pioneers, especially in the lighter weight divisions. So the Prodigy, what a nickname too. So that's BJ Penn. Thanks for listening, guys.